Hey, Miguel and Devin back here on the CRP, and it is podcast time. We're going to go long. I'm joined by my MMA teammate, Devin Miller. Devin, been a little bit. How are you?
Been good, Miguel. We've been missing you, man. I'm glad you're feeling better, and a lot has happened, and we got a lot to look forward to this weekend.
That's true. I am glad to be back. Thank you very much. And, when you let a little bit of time go by, then definitely we got a lot to talk about. We're going to start off with Cowboy, Cerrone, coming off a continued renaissance performance as he stopped or not stopped, but took out Al Iaquinta in the main event of the last UFC we saw. And that sets up Cerrone for some interesting things here in the future. Besides that, we got Stipe, DC, and Jones. We got Ferguson back. And we got the UFC back in Brazil this weekend. So a lot to talk about. But let's go full circle, talk about Cerrone and Iaquinta and what that means for Cerrone after another stand-up performance.
Yeah, Cerrone just continues to pile on to this late career resurgence that he's got going on right now. I think this was the best performance he had to date. In this 3-fight win streak that he's had since he came off that going 1-4, I think. A lot of people were writing him off, and we got a lot of people making funny stuff on these MMA threads about, we got to put Dad Cerrone in there with TRT Tour and motivated BJ Penn and Pico Graham, Jon Jones, and when he's since he's been a dad, he's really been on it. But he beat a very good fighter this weekend, and I think he really exposed Al as being really kind of one-dimensional because Al wasn't attacking the body. He was head hunting the whole time. Al does a really good job of keeping distance, but Al was never able to mix it up and take the fight to the ground or anything. Cerrone just simply had more tools. He seemed very motivated. He looked horrible at weigh-ins, but he didn't look that way in the fight, and he went 5 hard rounds, really busted Al up. And I think he's walked into a pretty big fight in his next fight. I think there's 3 guys that I've got as possibilities for Donald Cerrone going forward.
I'm interested to hear what you think. I think, Cerrone does deserve credit for, as I've been saying, a renaissance performance. Hey, you get a little gray, and people say you look like shit at the weigh-ins, right? And he is, 35, 36-year-old man. He's starting to look great, and he doesn't really give a shit. And that kind of is par for the course with Donald Cerrone. You're right. He didn't show it in the ring, and that's what was beautiful here. Here he took on a younger guy, a guy who said, I got more in the tank. I got less miles on my, less wear on my tires, so to speak, and I'm going to show that. And, at no point did Iaquinta establish that in the fight and take Cerrone out of his game plan. Cerrone game planning. I like what Joe Schilling brings to him in this corner. I thought, it hasn't translated a lot of the times for Schilling in his MMA career when he's fought, but he's a hell of a coach, and he definitely has him lucidly ground fighting. And you talked about Iaquinta being one-dimensional in his head hunting. Whoa. We got bugs everywhere here today in Costa Rica, dude. But, and not being able to get the ground fighting. You're right. Serra Longo. Matt Serra is the Renzo Gracie black belt, the Abu Dhabi, champion, et cetera, et cetera. Where is the ground fighting? It wasn't even an option here. If you're going to turn it into a one-dimensional fight against Cerrone, he's too cerebral at this point. He's been in every type of fight. You're never going to take him out of his game.
Yeah, I agree. And he looks so headstrong here lately, and he's really seems motivated that he's going to go out on good terms. But I wanted to run these past you, and I want to know what you think. And the 3 opponents that I think that he's got to possibly fight next, I think you can maybe add a 4th in there, and I'll mention him 4th as a possibility. It would be a rematch. I don't think it's likely, but I think there's 3 very likely possibilities. I think Cowboy versus Conor is probably the likely fight going forward, and I think that's Irish whiskey versus Budweiser, the Cowboy versus the Irishman. That you got this brash, money-making Hollywood showman and Conor versus the country boy blue-collar guy in Cerrone. I think it would sell. I think you got the winningest fighter in UFC history in Cerrone versus the most popular star they've ever had in Conor. I think that's the fight. But after that, you got Tony Ferguson, I think is a possibility. And Tony Ferguson, we're going to get to him later, but he's in negotiations with the UFC. But then number 3, we got Justin Gaethje, which I think is another possibility, who's coming off a big win against Edson Barbosa. What do you think? And then, real quick, I said I was going to mention a fourth person. The fourth person, if it's not one of those 3, which I think it will be one of those 3, is possibly a Nate Diaz rematch. And that might be something to be willing to get Nate Diaz out of retirement. Not really out of retirement, but back into the cage. What do you think? Who are you looking as possibly the favorite for Cowboy going forward?
I think the McGregor fight is the one that makes the most sense. The problem with the McGregor fight is that you kind of need McGregor's approval, right? It's the kind of thing where, McGregor isn't going to just fight anybody that they put in front of him. He's got his thought process and everything going into the fight. Now, he hasn't turned down a lot of, he's not, he wants his Khabib rematch, which is obviously, noble, I guess. But Cerrone fits that bill because, you kind of got to be another A type of guy to bring more money to generate interest in the fight. And I think Cerrone is that guy, that Cerrone could be the guy that plays a good foil for McGregor and therefore generates interest into making it a big super fight. McGregor is on the second fight of an 8-fight deal, so at some point he's going to have to get back into the rotation and be just one of the guys and fight here. He might as well grab these big paydays while he can. Cerrone, I think, fits the bill. That's the best idea there. The Gaethje fight, I'm not sure that Gaethje isn't a guy I'd keep in my back pocket for, maybe another 18 months or so and let some of these guys that are have more time with the company and have a lot more miles on them, like Ferguson, start, getting themselves in there. Another guy I'd like to see, and this is also up in the air and stuff, but, when we talked about fallout from the Poirier-Max Holloway fight, we thought that the best direction for Holloway to go would be to head back to 145. But say he doesn't, Holloway would be another excellent opponent for Cerrone or potentially McGregor, and he's the foil in there that I don't think you mentioned. Other than that, Nate Diaz, the UFC, I think, is at the point, and Dana, you can only go to the well so often, I think. And they've gone to the Diaz well on occasion, and it's paid off. So that has always given them their comfort that they can go off and be nuts and stuff, and that they'll get a fight when they're ready. And they kind of call their own shots and stuff like that. But I don't know if Dana wants to play that game anymore. He's got new bosses. Some of his experiments really are falling flat. If you look at, things like waiting around for Brock Lesnar and things like that, does he have, the patronage he had with the Fertittas, or is he now going to have to sit at the end of the year and say, hey, how come I didn't get a bonus this year? I don't know exactly how it goes, but he's got to be looking at going to the well and looking at the things he's been looking at for the last 10 years. You got to find new guys. You got to find new stuff. I think some of the directions they're going in other cases, show he's doing that. So I don't like the Nate Diaz idea at all. If Nate comes back, he'll probably be at 170 anyway. So we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I actually think that it's going to come. That there's 4 guys right now that are in the mix, and it's Tony, Conor, Gaethje, and Cerrone. I think that you're going to get a pairing of those two pairs of those two fighting each other. I think the other possibility is they have all but basically said that Poirier is going to be fighting Khabib. The only other possibility that I could even see is if that doesn't happen and Tony just met with the UFC, that Tony might end up fighting Khabib. I don't think that's going to happen, and that would throw a wrench in everything because then Poirier is probably going to fight Conor if that happens. Um, but I don't think that's going to happen. I think Poirier at this point, they're going to go ahead and make Poirier and Khabib. I think Tony by saying, champ shit only on his Twitter, that signals something. But he's in negotiation. He's got clearly negotiated a fight. I don't know if that's with Conor. I don't know if that's with Khabib. I don't know if that's with Donald Cerrone, Gaethje, whoever it is. Everything's up in the air right now. I think what's most likely is we're going to see Khabib and Poirier because that's all basically already done. And then we got those four that I mentioned: Gaethje, Cerrone, Conor, and Ferguson. I would prefer to see what I mentioned. I think that Conor, Cerrone, and Ferguson, Gaethje. I like those two fights a lot, and I think that that's what's likely. But what would you like to see, Miguel?
Yeah, I like to see them get this settled as soon as possible. They should announce the Khabib Poirier fight officially if that's the way they're going to go, and lay that to rest as a controversy, and put the doubt out of everybody's mind, and also, formally bring Khabib back into the fold. I think that the fact that Abu Dhabi is being considered as a venue is an excellent little bone they're throwing at Khabib because it's a Muslim country. Khabib is Muslim. At the end of the day, religion kind of crawled into the issues there with McGregor's disrespect and stuff like that. So I think it is a way of saying, okay, we're going to be in a country where none of that's going to happen. You don't have to worry about any of that. It'll be respected. You're going to get an opponent who's going to respect it in Poirier. And everything is going to be fine there. I think that does go a long way to patching that up. So they should clean that up. And I do think Cerrone and McGregor is the cherry fight. And if you want to go with Ferguson and Gaethje, that's good. Ferguson and Holloway wouldn't be bad either.
It seems like a big risk for Ferguson at this point. He deserves much more than a really tough fight with a guy like Justin Gaethje. But real quick, since the topic's mainly about Donald Cowboy Cerrone coming off another big win, 23rd win inside the octagon. He's got more fights under the Zuffa banner than any other fighter. Tremendous record. Is he, in your opinion, the greatest fighter that's never won UFC gold?
That's what's motivating him, right? I think he heard that. He heard that, and he said, I don't like the way that sounds. So now that's what motivates him to get the belt and stuff like that. And I think, it's an interesting question. I'd have to look at all-time rosters and see, there have been obviously, so many fighters over the years and things. He'd have to be in consideration, for it. Again, I don't think that sits well for him. There are a lot of people that too, they're considering Hall of Fame criteria, and they were saying, if you have a belt that puts you in the Hall of Fame, and then right there they're going to cut it off, and that would mean that Cerrone's out, and that makes no sense. You can't have a UFC Hall of Fame without Cerrone. Cerrone defines what would be a Hall of Fame fighter, and that is that, for the last 10 or 15 years, he's been, 10 years solid, he's been one of the top 5 faces in the company. McGregor, Rousey, Sonnen, Cerrone, and take your pick. But he's in the mix, right? Because who else do they have who's crossed over in that way and then been consistent in the way? If you're a Cerrone fan, you've been fed.
Well, that's the key word for me is consistency, because when you see Cerrone's record, he got his face punched in by somebody like Nate Diaz. But Nate Diaz, we've talked about this before on here. The Diaz brothers just constantly are in negotiations. They don't get fights. They don't feel like they're getting what they're worth, and it's really backfired on them in their legacy. And I think that it's brewed a lot of resentment that a lot of fans had. A lot of fans had a lot of endearing feelings toward the Diazes for so many years, but that behavior after 4, 5, 6 years turns him off. Cerrone's the complete opposite. Cerrone just kept fighting. And he took a couple losses to RDA. He took losses to Leon Edwards, and he got finished by Jorge Masvidal. He got dropped in the first round and finished by Darren Till. And here he is, just persistent, staying fighting. And now his name is probably higher than it's ever been. And I think he's walked into the biggest fight of his career next. He's probably one fight away from possibly a title fight, especially if it's somebody like Conor McGregor or Tony Ferguson. If he wins that fight, he's going to fight the winner of Khabib and Poirier. You can bet on it. If he fights Gaethje and finishes him, there's going to be a lot of people with his name value, his career, his run. The story is going to be huge, and I couldn't be happier for Donald Cowboy Cerrone. And he's also seemed like he's done a lot better since the split with Greg Jackson and Mike Winkeljohn, which is, I think, kind of ironic, but good for him nonetheless. I mean, that was a big story going into that Mike Perry fight. I mean, he was 1-4 in his last 5 fights, looked to be on his way out in his career. You know, they choose to go with Perry in that fight. He leaves the gym. It's a huge story. And now he's on the best run of his career at this point. And so very ironic that he's doing better since he's left that gym.
Yep, and more power to Cerrone. We'll see what the UFC does next. I think we both go for Cerrone versus McGregor, and that's, I think, would get the fans' vote as well. Now, where we have some things that shook up even further is in the heavyweight division, as Daniel Cormier and SStipe Miocic 2 has been announced. The Brock Lesnar fight has fallen by the wayside. We touched on that a little bit, but Lesnar at this point, Dana White labeling him retired, so he's done. And DC officially hit the media shortly after the announcements, where he says he's got 2 more in him. He wants Stipe and he wants Jones, and that's how he wants to go out. So at least we've got some closure in the heavyweight division. But we talked a little bit in the previous segment about Dana White and how Dana White going to the well for the things that have worked over the last 10 years sometimes hasn't worked out for him. Here's a perfect example of it. For the last a little bit of, call it about a year, basically, the MMA division of the heavyweights has been in a state of limbo as we wait for Brock Lesnar to get out of his WWE contract and come back. And then, he makes WWE appearances and he starts to look trimmed down, like he's actually getting off roids or whatever, and, getting into MMA type of shape. And, there's more talk and speculation. The guy doesn't say anything. And literally, SStipe Miocic was waiting. DC was waiting. DC also revealed he had back surgery in December. But, so he's going to be able to get through the rehab of that and get back into the ring here as he faces SStipe Miocic. But, he was waiting around for Lesnar in the big payday. So they got hijacked by that, and that's just not a good situation. It's good that they're going to move right on, that DC took the forefront and challenged Jones. That gets, the Lesnar thing firmly in the rearview mirror.
Yeah, and thank God, in my opinion. As a hardcore MMA fan, I'm liking what I'm hearing so much more from Daniel Cormier. That interview with Ariel Helwani earlier this week was refreshing, in my opinion. And, I did a short little CRP minute. I was playing with a new app and stuff, and I knew that we would end up talking a lot more about it here on the podcast. But we gotta talk about Daniel Cormier. Daniel Cormier has lost 2 fights in his career, and one of them was technically a no contest because he got overturned because of Jones failing a drug screen. But those were to one man, Jon Jones, who, if it were not for the scandals, would probably, I don't see how there's an argument against it, would be undoubtedly the best fighter we've ever seen yet. There's nobody that's been able to touch him. That's the only loss he's had. Other than that, Daniel Cormier has been just fantastic, a fantastic ambassador, a fantastic representative as a champion. He's not some guy that people don't know. The average casual fan doesn't know. People know Daniel Cormier. Great champion. He doesn't have to do this, Miguel. He doesn't have to do – in fact, he's taking a very big risk. The biggest win of his career is probably his win against Stipe, going up as the light heavyweight champion while Jones was out and securing the heavyweight strap, becoming a champ by knocking out the winningest heavyweight champion in UFC history in the first round. Well, now he's going to go risk that. He's going to go take on a very tough fight with Stipe, that's a hard fight. There's no guarantee that the same result's going to happen. Stipe is a very high-level fighter. So he has a possibility of going 1-1 and losing after getting his biggest win of his career and having that backtracked. And even if he gets through that, then he has a possibility of going 0-3 against Jon Jones. The only reason that he's willing to take these risks with these two fights, these are the two fights he has in mind before retirement, is because he understands the reward. The reward of winning those two fights that's GOAT status. That's being able to walk away with the greatest finish of his career. I mean, can you imagine if he gets through Stipe again for the second time and then it would be like a movie moment to see him finish Jon Jones. I mean, it'd be truly historic. It'd be an awesome moment for the sport, an awesome moment for him. And he would cap off quite a great career. So this is his competitive nature at 40 years old, wanting to go in against the two best guys at those two higher divisions for him to go against. And I'm a little biased when it comes to it. I'm rooting for him to get those two wins. I think that it'd be an awesome story for such a great, underappreciated fighter that I think history could. I mean, I think those two fights could define him for the next 100 years.
Yeah, no, I think Ferguson's talking champ shit. I think this is the shit he's talking about, right? This is champ shit. And I think that you're right, in terms of he doesn't have to do this. Another thing I think that encapsulates what Cormier brings that's special too is he was very much a finished product and a man when he came into the sport. You know what I mean? He didn't grow up in this thing. So he already also understood though about presentation, about speaking, in public and being a role model and things like that. And he came from a special place because on an Olympic team and things like that, there is that ideal a little bit. So he does have, a lot of backing when I haven't heard, Dan Cormier, you hear Jon Jones stories, you know what I mean? Even stories about when he gets settled in at the Arizona gym and, he doesn't want people around when he trains. He'll throw everybody the fuck out of the gym. He'll get everybody the hell out and then they'll do their thing and stuff. But he doesn't answer questions or anything like that. He operates in a very controlled atmosphere. You don't even hear stories about DC being a dickhead that way. You know what I mean? So he's a good guy. He's a great guy. And, yeah, when you look at your legacy, the way he's looking at it is, yeah, the Stipe thing is kind of the cherry on top first, right? Because what he really does need is to clean up with Jon Jones. But you're right. It's better for the story position with Jones as the last fight. And that is really what he wants, to fix that. And, that's motivation. That's champ shit.
Absolutely. And the main reason I was saying so adamantly that he does not need to do this is because there's a lot of guys in his position at this point that would retire, go off in the sunset, call fights, enjoy their life, and spin everything. I mean, he's already got the win over Stipe. He doesn't have to even spin that. But when it comes to the Jon Jones thing, scandal. There's a lot of guys. I've always said forever, anytime I get in with my buddies and we're talking about the greatest all-time list, because that stuff always comes up in combat sports, who's the greatest ever? My very first question. What?
My Slurpee cup says Fedor.
Fedor.
There's your greatest ever.
He's up there, but my first question always is, okay, are we counting Jon Jones or are we not? And if the answer is no, then okay, then there's a lot of possibilities. You got George, you got Fedor, you got DC, you got Mighty Mouse. I always say the same thing. Well, what if we count Jon Jones? Well, if we count Jon Jones, he's number one in my eyes. I don't see how you can rank him anywhere else. I mean, I'm not going to rank him 3 or 4 or whatever. If you're going to overlook the scandal. So DC would be able to be kind of like, oh, well, yeah, I lost him twice, but he's the only guy I ever lost to, and he was a career juicer. I mean, he could do that. But the thing is, I think he knows the UFC, there's a chance that Jon Jones is able to get through the rest of his career without popping again. We've seen athletes do this before that have had notorious scandals before that get things right later in their career. And he could possibly just dominate for another 5 to 10 years even. He's young. He needs that win over Jon Jones. So for him to even want to be taking this fight, this just shows that DC is not – it reminds me of that Nelly song from like back about 10 years ago about 2 is not a winner and 3 nobody remembers. Like, ain't that the truth? Like, he's like, I don't want – I'm not – I want to be the winner. I don't want to be number 2. I don't want to be Joe Frazier. I want to be – I want to be the elite. I mean, people remember Joe Frazier. They remember Jake LaMotta. They remember they remember these guys, but – do they remember him on the same category as Muhammad Ali and Sugar Ray Robinson? Do they remember Magic Johnson the same way they remember Michael Jordan? Or I mean, it's just different. There's something different between 1 and 2. I mean, there's a huge gap. And right now, to the casual fan, I mean, there's going to be some of them just Jones haters who are going to point to that and throw out that no matter what, they're not going to give Jones those wins, and they're gonna. I think there's legitimate reasons to say that too, though. I mean, I don't want to discredit that the steroid violations should outweigh those wins. Well, but I don't think that's going to be the majority. I think the majority are going to remember, and they're going to laugh at Daniel Cormier crying after he lost the second fight and getting knocked out, and they're going to remember you got beat. You don't call yourself the GOAT. You got beat twice to Jones. So he needs that fight.
Yeah, no, I agree. And what I think makes it even a more impressive challenge for Jones and for him to not take either the high road and say, no, I don't want to fight him again. I'm over that. He cheated twice and I'm done, or any of the other sort of party lines he's thrown out there is even if Jon Jones is off of roids 100% and proven scientifically, there's still absolutely no guarantee that Daniel Cormier is even going to be able to beat him. So
I don't think he will.
It's still a massive challenge, right? You know what I mean? So if that was the excuse before, then and you get him now clean and you beat him clean, then yeah, you've rewritten the whole story and the whole legacy, and it is a good thing. But the reason I like it is because it's not, the steroids aren't such a big, you're still going to be fighting a really motivated, high-end fighter. Maybe off steroids it'll make a difference, but Cormier's also hit 40. That's like a anti-steroid, you know what I mean? So it is going to be interesting because it is still a mountainous challenge, and that's impressive about Cormier.
Yeah, and Miguel, I've said it once. I'll say it 1,000 times. I when it comes to Jon Jones, until I see some kind of chink in his armor, I believe he's going to either have to be one of two things. He'll have to be old and frail before somebody beats him, or he's going to have to go against somebody like a Francis Ngannou who can just knock him. Somebody big that can just really just rock him. And I don't see it. I love Daniel Cormier. I would love to see it happen. I think Jon Jones, as you just said, it sounds really nice. It sounds like a great storybook ending. He goes and gets the second win over Stipe, and then he's talking about wanting to do this at 205, which I think is a huge mistake. If anything, make Jones come up. Make Jones come to heavyweight. I think that is where he could possibly win that fight. Going down to 205.
What's Cormier weight at heavyweight?
Like 240-something.
240-something. See, because to me, I wonder if you let Jones come in full blown, and everything. I wonder if that would be to Cormier's advantage or not. I don't know. It's interesting.
Yeah, that's true.
In terms of all-time matches, and I believe for old-time fans, a guy that we never got to see in his prime. He was already past his prime when he made UFC, and even when he did his pancrase stuff, he was already but I'd be interested to see a guy with skills like a Boss Root and take on Jon Jones and see how that goes. If Boss was in his full blown prime and was doing this and had been dedicated to this, a guy who was that precise with his strikes, and a guy who could really weather a storm. So I don't know. There's always all time great matchups that we can speculate about, you know. So we'll see. Now, Boss isn't in the discussion for all time great because he's got like what 2 or 3 UFC fights, but you know, if you look back at the raw athlete that guy was, he was an unbelievable guy. Yeah, it's just kind of
palm striking.
Yeah. I mean, from what you saw and stuff like that, I knew him. I got to meet him several times. He trained with Aaron Riley a couple of times, and just his understanding of the whole game and the whole, you know, he knew submissions from the Japanese style, but he understood the game inside and out. But what he bought was striking that was just out of this world precise, you know. And he's a guy who could see emotion, and his body is almost like a recorder where he just would be doing a precise motion instantly and just didn't have a lot of polish to polish his technique. So anyway, you know, that's just for the old school guys. I'm just having a blast from the past, but that's what I think of when I think of like a guy with Jon Jones. I remember if you look at that of Boss Rutten, when he won the UFC's title, he beat Kevin Randleman, and Randleman was about as, you know, Randleman and Jon Jones may be right there. What?
You think he won that fight?
Who, Boss?
Yeah, do you think he won that fight? There's a lot of controversy about that.
Oh no, I put it this way. I sat cage side of that fight, and I talked to Bob Meyerowitz and Boss Rutten after that fight. I avoided Randleman because Randleman was pissed, throwing chairs and calling Bob Meyerowitz a Jew. He came back to the cage screaming, "Where's that Jew? Where's that Jew?" And Boss was in the cage doing an interview. It was crazy shit. But no, I firmly believe he won that fight. If you look 4 to 5 minutes in, he delivered a body kick that took everything out of Randleman. Randleman did nothing after that. But to make a long story short, your discussion of best athlete ever in the UFC may be as long as Jon Jones and Kevin Randleman. So,
well, my criteria when I didn't plan on going into like my criteria about greatest all time. We'll have to do like a podcast on this about just the greatest fighters in UFC history. But I look at, because somebody like Boss Rutten, I think, had the potential to be the first great champion in the UFC. He just didn't fight enough. But I think that he would have beat somebody like Daniel Cormier. With on top of that, Daniel Cormier, Randy Couture. He was also not a big heavyweight. He could have probably made 85. Boss Rutten wasn't a huge man, but very just transformative guy. I mean, I think he was the first great commentator, that's for sure, and probably one of the first true great mixed martial artists. But when I look at the greatest of all time, I'm looking at longevity, dominance, and just what they've done to what their name value has brought. Like Conor McGregor gets some credit there, just his just transcending the sport, making it bigger, changing the game. But really, longevity, success as a champion, success as a fighter. I mean, that's the kind of stuff I look at. The competition they beat. And Jon Jones, you take away the scandals, I mean, he's just cleaned house. He's dominated that division for almost 10 years. So that's why I look at that. But when I look at DC, I'm looking at a guy won the Strikeforce Grand Prix at heavyweight, fought a bunch of fights at heavyweight and won those, went down to light heavyweight, beat everybody there but Jones, went back up to heavyweight, basically controlled that division when Jon Jones was out screwing up. Goes up to heavyweight and wins the belt there, becomes a double champion, as a great ambassador of the sport, has been more active than Jones over the past 10 years. There's still an argument. If he wins one fight against him, there's no argument. It's Daniel Cormier. And like I said, I'm a little biased with this. I love Stipe, though, too. So, I mean, I feel bad for cheering against Stipe, especially he's a Midwestern boy. He's only a few hours from me. But Daniel Cormier, I think that'd be an awesome story if he could pull off those 2 wins. But going on, we kind of discussed this a little bit, Miguel, but I guess we'll throw a little bit about it again. We don't have to spend too much time on it. But Tony Ferguson is back, and he released an awesome promo on his Twitter account. Goes to Vegas with his team to meet with UFC brass, discussing his next fight. Looks like he's cleared. The restraining order with his wife has been cleared. And, I mean, the winner of this is the fans for sure.
Yeah, again, he's a guy that should be in the title picture. They have a glut, and they can't, get into the next title fight. They're not in a logical way. The chance of him fighting McGregor, that, again, I think Cerrone pointed out that, fighting McGregor doesn't mean an instant payday. Maybe you'll get more money or a bump here and there and stuff like that, but everybody's under contract and this, that, and the other stuff. So it's not like, all of a sudden you're going to double or triple your money. So, but it would be a lot more attention for Ferguson to be a high-profile thing and to be a bone they could throw him while he waits, because didn't he have an interim title? Now, doesn't Dustin Poirier, how many interim titles are we going to have? Did Ferguson just go away because he got suspended for a little bit? Or, what was the deal there? So he did the right thing. He came back, campaigned, and at the end it looked like, the family matter there was about, he's a high-level athlete, and his intensity, is probably scary at some point, probably to those close around him and stuff, and the focus and stuff. But it really does look like what it was all about, right? So if that seems to be the case, they should get him a fight as soon as possible, and is the best fight possible. And, you were talking about matching him up with Justin Gaethje. That's the best fight possible for the fans. I'm not sure that's the best fight for Tony. He gets hurt in that fight. Justin is the kind of guy who's not going to let him off the hook. And, he's been dinged up, and at 35, 36, you're not going to get a more fit guy at that age or a more, talented fighter. But, the age is age. Age is a separate opponent. So, if he knew everything he knows now at 36 and you can put it into his body at 27, but that's not the case. He's still 36.
I agree with you, Miguel, and I think it's completely unfair. And to be completely honest, what I would like to see is him to get matched up with Khabib and go fight him in Abu Dhabi, and then somehow persuade Dustin Poirier to fight Conor McGregor. Because I think the Conor McGregor, it's just like with Stipe and Jon Jones versus the heavyweight title fight with Daniel Cormier. The bigger fight, I said then, would have been Stipe versus Jon Jones. I think that's a bigger fight, even if it's not for a title, and if it's out of division, it's not for a title against the champion. For Dustin Poirier, I think it's the same thing. The bigger fight's Conor McGregor. More money, more attention, more upside to avenge that loss on your record. If they could somehow persuade that to make it happen, that makes the division flow so much better, because let's be honest, Dustin Poirier has three really big wins in a row. He beat Eddie Alvarez, Justin Gaethje, who's a top contender, and then he beat Max Holloway, who's never fought at lightweight. So him and McGregor makes a lot more sense at this stage. They're really kind of like the number 3 and number 4 guy in this division. The top 2 guys in this division right now are Khabib and Tony. And that's what I would prefer to see happen. I just don't think it's going to happen. I think they've already kind of thrown it out there that it's going to be Poirier versus Khabib in Abu Dhabi. I don't think that they'll make Tony and Conor. I don't think that they'll do that. But there has been signs that Conor's training hard and looking good in the gym. And now this comes out with Tony. Tony's acting like it's going to be a big fight. Dana seems happy about it. That is a possibility. And that would make the division go good too, and that would probably almost certainly set up like Cerrone versus Gaethje, or Cerrone versus, like you said, Holloway, or maybe a Diaz rematch or something. But I'm interested to see who they're putting Tony against. And this division is just so stacked up at top. And I'm glad he's back. I'm glad he's clear. I'm glad he's healthy. When he's running around talking about people are in his walls and he's got microchips in his knees and he's throwing holy water, quote unquote, holy water on his wife. I mean, that's concerning, especially when you look at his fighting style, and he gets hit over the head a lot. And, we know CT is a very real thing. So I'm just glad he's healthy and glad he's coming back. We've covered that in 2 segments now about this division. So I think we can move on, Miguel, just for the sake of time, to what the big event for this weekend is. We got a big pay-per-view that we haven't even covered yet, 40 minutes into this podcast, UFC 237 this weekend, and it's headlined. We're going to do a little preview on it, and it's headlined by a big women's strawweight title fight, which I remember when this fight was being marketed, when we knew this fight was going to happen. We knew this fight was going to happen as soon as Jessica Andrade one punch KO'd Karolina Kowalkiewicz last year. And she was also coming off a big win, just dominant win over Claudia Gadelha. And I can compare Jessica Andrade to like a female Vanderlei Silva. Just the way she throws her strikes, tucks her chin, throws the looping hooks, comes straight at you with wide left hooks to follow by wide right hooks. But the amount of power that woman has for a 115-pound woman is unreal. And she's fought, I believe, as high as 135. I think she fought Raquel Pennington at bantamweight in the UFC. And she's going against probably the most underdog champion. I mean, Rose Namajunas is becoming a very beloved character, I think, as a champion. But if you get this underdog feel from Rose Namajunas, or maybe it's just me, but I felt that way both fights with Joanna. She's very likable. And I feel that way going into this fight. Like, she's got this underdog vibe, that there's this chance that she gets her jaw rocked by Jessica Andrade, who is just a powerhouse. So I think this is an interesting matchup. I'm looking very much forward to it. I'm actually looking more forward to this than I was the Joanna fight rematch with Rose Namajunas, which I've rewatched that fight several times. I thought that fight was a very close fight, a lot closer than what people realize. I thought the commentary was so skewed. I think that I love Rose Namajunas, but her likability kind of affects the UFC commentator booth, I think, a little bit. And they were definitely kind of pulling for her in that fight. You get the sense. So I'm interested to see how this fight turns out. And what's your thoughts? What's your initial thoughts on this main event, Miguel?
Yeah, I think it's a tough challenge for Namajunas. I think she likes that. I think, she sought it out as far as those things go, where she wanted to fight her in Brazil and that sort of stuff. I think Namajunas, I think you're right. Here, I think the UFC really has something unique. And, if she keeps winning, they're going to have to not let her turn into Demetrius Johnson, where they just, have her fight every couple of months. They should really, try to do something with her in terms of media and marketing and stuff. I don't know. Maybe she doesn't want that, because she's kind of, but what I'm getting at is that personality of hers, because she's a real genuine person. She wears a lot of that on her sleeve, So I like that about her, and I like that, this challenge here. With Andrade, you're going to get the Vanderlei talk. I'm going to beat her head in, and that's it. And that's cool, you know what I mean? And at the end of the day, Namajunas is walking into the fight as an underdog, or, Andrade is at minus 120 with Namajunas paying back even money. So it's a real tight fight, close to a pick'em fight down there. So Namajunas is getting a little bit of respect in terms of she's the champion, the defending champion, and she beat the man in the division kind of thing, the top gun, and then repeated it even though it was a tough fight. So I give Namajunas a lot of credit, and I think, here's the situation again with Pat Barry and some of the coaching that she's receiving there. You may have a guy who maybe is more suited to coaching than in his career, where sometimes things went wrong for him in the ring.
I actually believe, Miguel, I'm going to differ with you a little bit. I think Rose Namajunas could be one of the biggest stars in the UFC. I think she could be a huge draw for them. I think that's what I was trying to say. I'm sorry if I wasn't that emphatic, but I think you're absolutely right. I'm sorry. Well, you mentioned her. You compared her a little bit to Mighty Mouse Johnson, which I loved. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think Mighty Mouse is one of the greatest fighters ever.
Well, I hope they don't turn her into that. You know, I
Okay.
hope they don't let it go that way with her because I think they've got a real diamond in the rough. That's what I was trying to say.
Okay, yeah, because if she's able to pull off wins over somebody like 2 wins over Joanna, if she can get through Jessica, if she can get through a Tatiana Suarez, I mean, you're all these fights she's going to be an underdog, and if she's able to get these wins in, she's young, she's got this really humble personality. I mean, I've ran into, I've had my buddies' girls and stuff over here watching fights and stuff, and they've made comments like, "Oh, I love Rose Namajunas. She's just so humble, and she's appealing to. She's got an appeal to her that a lot of people really like, and I'm almost guaranteed that she's gonna. It's almost gonna be unanimous about people are gonna be rooting for her. Not everybody thinks she's gonna win this weekend. Not all my clique that comes and watch the fights with me. Not pretty much. I mean, Jessica's a feared opponent, but I do think that she's a very likable character. And one thing that's really interesting with this, and it goes back to the whole Conor McGregor bust incident, and I'll tie this in real quick. She was the co-main event that night when Khabib ended up fighting Al Iaquinta. He was supposed to fight Tony Ferguson, then Max Holloway, then he fought Al Iaquinta. The famous, just infamous bus incident. She was on that bus. She got really shook up. Apparently, she saw a counselor and everything about it. And I guess she was shook up for months. Well, she got a lot of ridicule. That was the only time that Rose kind of got some ridicule. She's been pretty much universally beloved. She got some ridicule over that, just kind of made fun of on the internet for being just kind of weak and stuff. Well, that was her main motivation, apparently, for taking this fight with Jessica Andrade in Brazil. She did not need to do this. And for her to go down to headline this pay-per-view in Brazil against such a tough opponent like Jessica Andrade is really saying something. I think it's very risky for her, but I think it's a move that could turn her into a big star if she gets through this, especially with a very impressive performance.
Exactly, and I hope that happens for her. Even though with her personality, I think she may not embrace it like Ronda Rousey did, kind of thing. You know what I mean? But I think she deserves it, whatever the rewards are, because I think that first of all, she's a hell of a fighter. You know what I mean? She came out through the TV show. She's been with the UFC in the women's divisions, coming along. And when she faced off against Joanna, she was a big underdog, so you got to give her a lot of credit. So, yeah. So, how are you looking at this fight? Are you ready to make a pick or what?
Yeah, let's go ahead and look at the odds on this stuff. We've got, as you said, it's women's strawweight title fight. You got the champion coming in at plus 100. And you got the challenger, Jessica Andrade, coming in at minus 120. I do want to switch up the wage range format a little bit with you here. I want us both to make a pick here, man, with this one. Just to go against each other a little bit. I'm going to say that Rose is able to implement a lot of the same game plan that Joanna did, and this is just a gut instinct. I think there's a big possibility that she catches a very hard shot from Jessica Andrade that hurts her. She did a really good job of making Joanna miss. And she's got very good in and out movement, good side to side movement. I think she's only going to get better. She's young. She's advanced. She's improved tremendously since she first came into the UFC to where she is now in a very short period of time. She's had a long layoff. I think that she's probably gotten a lot better in that span. I think that she's going to be able to move her feet enough to outbox Jessica Andrade. I think she's going to have some moments where it's going to look rough, but I think that she'll land the cleaner shots, land more shots, and maybe even mix up a takedown in there. This was hard for me, but I'm going to go with Rose Namajunas by a decision, but it's going to be a tough one.
Yeah, I think she's fully capable of managing the fight here. I think Andrade, a girl who, as you stated here, has incredible power and is a powerhouse for a 115-pounder. You know, you start to rely on that, and then all of a sudden, somebody with a little bit of technique and skill, Rose will take her chances playing with you for 5 rounds. Andrade, can she manage a 5-round fight? Is she going to have that power entering round 4 after she's been eating a jab for a little while, getting maybe front kicks, keeping her at bay, and been swinging and missing for a hell of a lot of time? So it'll be very interesting. If you look at the ring, MMA records and stuff, it's kind of a superficial thing here because it looks like Andrade has, more than double the fights of Namajunas and stuff like that. But I credit Namajunas and her time around the UFC and the camps that she's been. She really does, have more experience almost than an 8-3 record would show. Now defending her belt, she does have an amateur career, and then the whole time with the TV show as well. So she's a pretty battle-tested girl, and at 26, she's still not even in her prime. So we'll see.
I agree. And moving on to the fight that I'm looking most forward to on the night, we got Jose the Great, as I used to call him, Jose Aldo, going against Alexander the Great, Volkanovski. We got a real upstart here with Volkanovski. Ferocious fighter. Unbeaten in his tenure in the UFC. Just came off a big finish of Chad Mendes. Mendes was coming back off of a suspension. He got a big win over Miles Jury, then dropped the fight to Volkanovski. A lot of people think Volkanovski could be a future champ. But then you got Jose Aldo. 3 fights he's lost in 14 years, all while fighting the best of the best. He's somebody, we were talking about greatest of all times earlier. He's up there, top 10 for sure. Just longevity of you got guys like Max Holloway and Conor McGregor who have beat him, the only 2 guys in 14 years that have beat him. And it's hard to think that they're going to still be around in 2030, still fighting at the very top level of the game. But that's what we've seen with Jose Aldo. I remember him literally back in the WEC in early 2007, 2008 fighting Mike Brown, and 2009, 2010 fighting Uriah Faber. Just leg kicking Uriah Faber into the hospital, and then coming into the UFC, gifted the champion because he was a champion in the WEC and dominating for years up until that McGregor fight. Never really got his due. And here he is. He's got 2 good finishes back-to-back over Jeremy Stephens and Renato Moicano. And now he's going against one of the most popular up-and-coming guys in featherweight. The only thing that I think would have made this better for Jose is if Max would have won against Poirier, because I think there's a chance they could have made this a title fight. And it would have been cool to see Jose get back to featherweight gold before he retires. He was talking about retiring at the end of the year. I don't know. I don't know. He's looked so good, and this is a big chance for him to be like another Donald Cerrone, who's having a career resurgence. The only thing is, Jose Aldo's still only in his early 30s, believe it or not, and he's an unsung hero in the MMA world for sure. Jose Aldo's never gotten his due. What do you think, Miguel?
Yeah, I think the McGregor loss and the way it happened with the 13 seconds there just was a humiliating thing, and that really, set the pace. The Holloway fights, Holloway's looking like a special fighter, so you don't want to hold those against him. He has looked good since the Holloway fights, and that's impressive. And at 32, you would think perhaps there's still something in the tank there. Now, with Volkanovski, as you pointed out, Volkanovski's coming with a head of steam, but he's also 30 years old, so there's not that much of a difference in terms of actual, age and things like that. And we'll see. The Volkanovski who went to a unanimous decision with Darren Elkins, if you're going to give Jose Aldo the same opportunity to go to the judges, you're going to find yourself on the short end of the stick there, I think. If the fight goes that way, Aldo's a multi-skilled guy, whereas Elkins is more, and I know he took out Mendes, but the big question there is as you pointed out, Mendes returning back from a suspension. So this is Mendes off the steroid. And yeah, he got knocked out. Before that, he was a top guy, but the suspension coming off, changing your body, changing your diet, and stuff like that. Yeah, did he face the Chad Mendes that we all expect? I don't know.
I don't know either. And I will say this, that if Volkanovski is able to get through Aldo, if Holloway's going back down to 145, which it looks like he's going to probably do, I think that's probably a title fight we'll see later on this year. If Aldo wins, I just don't know if they'll do a third fight with Holloway. And that's going to confuse this division up a little bit. I mean, I guess that'd be really good for guys like Zabit Magomedsharipov, and Frankie Edgar is somebody that Max Holloway never fought, but at the same time, he lost 2 fights decisively to Jose Aldo in his career. Got knocked out by Brian Ortega. If Volkanovski loses this fight, other than maybe Zabit and Yair, if he gets a couple wins, I don't really see much at this division for Max Holloway going forward. I mean, it's going to kind of stalemate Max Holloway. It'd be kind of a perfect time for Max Holloway to take a year or so off, get his brain together, and bulk up for lightweight, where he's going to end up building his career at, because he looked really small. And then leaving this division open for maybe, if Aldo wins this, maybe Aldo and Ortega later this year for a vacant title. Because I don't see, if Aldo wins this fight, I'm not sure what makes sense for Max Holloway going forward in the short term. If Alexander Volkanovski wins, you definitely clearly got a new contender. And I think that's intriguing about this bout. But going on to the wage range here, we got Jose Aldo. They got the vet. They got the former champion as a -140 favorite to the +120 of Volkanovski. I'm going to say this. I think that I don't like pressure fighters against Jose Aldo. Jose Aldo doesn't get taken down. He's a great striker. He is so fast. Volkanovski does tend to fight kind of emotional, presses forward a little too much. I think that the footwork is going to be totally different than what Volkanovski's been used to. I think that we're going to see a motivated Jose being down in Brazil. I think Jose's going to put on a performance. And I think that after this fight, it's going to be very confusing what goes on at featherweight, because I think Jose might get a third fight.
I got to agree with you on this one. I tend to think that the renaissance of some of these fighters now fighting at home and stuff like that, he's thinking about legacy, and it just means going out with wins at home. That's legacy in its own right, especially to a Brazilian and stuff like that. So he definitely doesn't want to lose this fight. And like I said, Volkanovski, the book on the level of Chad Mendes that he faced is out. And, prior to that, he doesn't have any terrifically huge names on his scalp. So we'll see. This is a major test for him. On the road, it's I think he lives in Australia, doesn't he? Or something like that. So Volkanovski going across, there'll be some time differences and stuff there. And Brazil's not an easy trip.
Moving on, we got another vet, another goat sitting here. But this time it's a spider. Is this the spider's last dance, Miguel? We thought it might be with the Adesanya fight. I thought the moment was kind of ruined. I thought that was perfect. The crying at the weigh-in, the epic fight that we know even more now since the Gastelum fight. We are dealing with a real deal with Adesanya, a real superstar. Just delivered one of the greatest fights we've seen, and it seemed so perfect as a passing of the guard fight. He fought great in that fight. I think that was the time to hang it up, but he wants to fight in Brazil. And I think I don't want to give too much away of my pick. I think he might prove me wrong on that, because it looked like the Adesanya fight was a perfect walk-away moment with him crying at weigh-ins and the kind of passing of the guard to Adesanya type of thing. But I think he might prove me wrong this week as the perfect moment to go out, because they're going to be in Brazil. But what do you think? Do you think this really is the last the last web that the spider weaves this weekend?
No, I don't think so. I think we'll see.
You don't.
Yeah, you know, I harken back, and I know a lot of the stuff that we talk about at the end of the day, maybe innuendos and stuff like that. But at some point, the UFC extended him what was a lifetime contract. It's something like 20 fights, or just like a ridiculous amount of fights at the tail end of his career, just to make sure that they locked him up and kept him aboard. Now, things didn't go perfectly right for him. He's had some suspensions and injuries, and obviously with the leg injury and stuff late in his career. The tail end of his career has been a little bit of a slide and stuff. But I think Anderson fully envisions himself being able to fight another 3 or 4 more times. At the end, those are all paydays as well. You have to consider that he's on the higher end of the scale, so he's socking away some money. He's in his 40s. Every one of those becomes like, hey, this is my last one. This is my last one. If you can get another one in and sock another $300K away, I think that's at the level of Anderson Silva. Aside from the foot injury, the leg injury, he was relatively healthy throughout his whole career. If I remember him correctly, I don't, at the end of the day, he lived in the States and, had homes in California and Vegas and things like that. So maybe he experienced some of the lifestyle and things like that. But when you go back to Brazil, you're still going to need, a couple $1 million in the bank to live out the rest of your life. And I think that's what he's going to be faced with.
Yeah, I don't know. I think the result of this is gonna determine a lot. And when we look at the odds here, they've got Anderson as a plus 135 underdog to minus 155, which I think is so unfair because Cannonier had a 500 record going into his middleweight debut that he took on short notice as a fill-in to fight David Branch, who's not even ranked now. He just got another loss to Jack Hermanson, knocks him out, gets in the rankings, and now he walks into a fight in Brazil with Anderson Silva. I think Anderson Silva's going to win this fight. I think this is solid money on Anderson Silva. He looked like he still understood tricks against Adesanya, and Adesanya may have been a little starstruck being in there against his idol. Didn't really turn up the heat like he should have. But at the same time, I think a lot of it, like I said, going into the Gastelum fight, I think that Anderson just still recognizes game. He just still recognizes tricks, something that a lot of guys are not going to. I'm not sure Cannonier's experienced enough to be able to deal with the level of striking that Anderson still does have. I don't think he's going to land a big bomb on Anderson in Brazil. I got Anderson winning this fight. And I think that could throw a curveball into my hole. This is the last web the spider weaves. But I think if he gets a nice finish over a powerhouse down in Brazil, you might be surprised. He's like 44 now, so we might see him. But at the same time, he might just say, "I want to only fight in Brazil going forward." So I don't know. We'll see. Who do you got?
I think Anderson should win this fight because I think it's going to be primarily a stand-up fight, and I think that you're right. There's levels to the game, and he's just too sophisticated for Cannonier, who at this point, is going to look like a bodybuilder out there. And I think that leads to an extension of his career. And I think, at this point in his life, you could even see Anderson take a year off and pop up at Bellator.
If they let him go. If they let him go.
And then they supposedly locked him up, and, maybe they want the Spider, a potential GOAT, to always be a UFC guy and not go out the way some of the other guys have. But he'd go over there, a Chael Sonnen rematch. He'd fight Fedor if they needed him to fight Fedor. There's too many options. They could even do rivalry fights if he wanted to fight Vanderlei. They could do anything they wanted in cash paydays for the next 18 months to 2 years. And we've got a Bellator this weekend, so we're
I was going to say, speaking of Bellator, I really wish this wasn't on a different week. One of the better Bellator cards in a while, and they go and put it on a week of a UFC pay-per-view with a very good card. But we're going to cover Bellator 221. We're going to cover a quick preview and wage rage. They got a big super fight for Bellator standards. They got their featherweight champion going up to lightweight to challenge their lightweight champion. They got Patricia Pitbull Ferreira, the featherweight champion of Bellator. He's going up to fight Michael Chandler. Good fight, and I plan on watching it. I'm gonna have to watch it on replay. But main event in this card, they got Chandler as a -200 favorite versus a +170 for Pitbull. I like both these guys. I think both these guys could be top contenders. I was saying, I don't really see the motivation for doing this. I think they should have just kept these guys winning and being champions of their division, because I like them having some legit champions that the UFC's never had. I think this is a tough task for Pitbull going up in weight to fight Chandler. I think that he's about as good of an opponent as they have for Chandler right now. But I'm definitely going to lean into the favor of Michael Chandler to win this fight, probably by decision. I think it's a good main event. I think this is the kind of fights that they need. These are two Bellator groomed fighters, never been in the UFC. I like that. And then we got the same thing in the co-main event. We got a welterweight Grand Prix quarterfinal fight. The winner of this will go on to the semifinals, to the quarterfinal. I mean to the final. I apologize. This is actually a semifinal fight. I messed up on the titling of this, so that threw me off a little bit. But the winner of this will go on to the final to fight the winner of Nyman Gracie and Rory McDonald. They got Michael Venom Page as a +255 underdog to the -215 of Douglas Lima. Here you got two other groomed Bellator talents, especially Michael Venom Page. He's got a lot of history, a lot of hype behind him. And I like to see that with Bellator. They got some talents. They got their main event and their co-main event have four organically developed Bellator stars fighting this weekend. They're both great fights. In this fight, I'm leaning toward Douglas Lima. I think the Lima's a little bit bigger. He's a better grappler than Paul Daly is, and Paul Daly was able to get Venom Page down. But Venom Page is such a dynamic striker, very talented, but he does have holes, and he showed that against Paul Daly. This whole tournament is up in the air because I originally thought that Rory McDonald would win this with a landslide, but Rory McDonald, I thought, lost the fight to John Fitch, and I don't know where his head's at, even going against Nyman Gracie. So the winner of this fight might end up winning this whole tournament and becoming the Bellator welterweight champion. But I'm going to go with Douglas Lima to win this fight over Michael Venom Page. And with that, Miguel cut out randomly. I'm going to say we covered all the big headlines from this week. We covered the UFC 237 this Saturday. You can only buy it on ESPN Plus, so keep that in mind. Great card. Bellator 221 on DAZN. Stay tuned to the CRP, man. We're covering it all. We're trying to keep you informed. We've been doing this a while now, and we're having a lot of fun doing it. And I got Michael Chandler. I got Douglas Lima. I've got Rose Namajunas, Anderson Silva, and Jose Aldo. The big names I got winning this weekend. And some of those are underdogs. So stay tuned, subscribe, like, share. Tune in next time to the CRP. Talk to you later.